And welcome everyone. It's so great to see so many new people and people we've met before. Just to introduce a little bit about today's webinar and the host, my name's Dana Bryant. I'm the Outreach Officer at Volunteer West Virginia. I've been here for about 10 years. I grew up in New Martinsville. I went to Magnolia High School with Holly, and I moved back to do a year of AmeriCorps service, and I've been here ever since. So that's my story. And I'm also joined by Gina today. She's helping everyone come in and out of the waiting room. And if you have any questions throughout today's webinar, you can go ahead and put those in the chat box, and that's how we'll answer your questions. So Gina will be helping with that. And we're really excited about today's webinar. This is the first time we've ever covered this topic. So if this is your first Volunteer West Virginia Wednesday, it is our free monthly webinar series here at Volunteer West Virginia. We are a small state agency located in beautiful Charleston, West Virginia. There's about a staff of 9 of us, and we promote volunteerism in the state as well as overseeing the state's AmeriCorps program. So this is our monthly free training opportunity for the state for nonprofits and volunteers, and we explain our programs. We like to network during this time together, and we provide trainings like today's grant management training. And then most of all, we have fun. So today is going to be fun and informal. I mentioned this before. If you have any questions, we're going to pause throughout the webinar, or you can put them in the chat box while it's on your mind, and then we'll answer it at the appropriate time. Here is a sneak peek of our upcoming training topics. In June, we're taking a summer break, which I'm happy about because we're busy getting ready to host the Governor Service Awards, and that's our recognition program for the state. So we're taking the month of June off. And then in July, we're going to be back with a new training topic. This is going to be from Jenny Keener at Heart and Hand in South Charleston. She runs a wonderful volunteer program. So we asked her to come present on rural volunteerism. So if you're a volunteer program, you're not going to want to miss that. It's on July 10th. It's the community quote, rural volunteerism. So we're really happy about that. In August, we're going to be talking about project management. So today is grant management, and that'll be project management. So I think you all might be interested in that as well. And then in September, it is National Preparedness Month, and we are going to do Get Ready West Virginia, and it's going to be about disaster and emergency preparedness. So that's another branch of Volunteer West Virginia that we do. We like to get community members prepared for disasters, and Gina oversees that program, who's here today. So that's going to be in September. And we will have webinars all throughout 2024. So you can register on our website, volunteer.wv.gov. They're all free, and you're going to want to sign up. We're going to have a grant training coming up with Nikki again later this year. So you're not going to want to miss that. So we have some exciting news to share really briefly before we jump into today's presentation. I wanted to do a commercial. One of the things we do at Volunteer West Virginia is we promote volunteer opportunities from across the state. We make it super easy. So if you're looking for volunteers, you're going to want to visit our website and post your volunteer opportunity. The reason I'm telling you this is because we are launching a new television and radio campaign that'll run through June and August of 2024. So it's going to start next month, and we're going to be doing TV and radio commercials across the state through the West Virginia Broadcasters Association. So if you're looking through volunteers, this is going to be a great opportunity to get free advertising. This campaign is going to be around the September 11th day of service. So if you didn't know, September 11th is a day of service. It's a national day of service. And we want West Virginians to know about this and to visit our website to find a volunteer opportunity. So if you're looking for volunteers, even if it's not for September 11th, this is going to be a great time because the campaign is going to be running for 3 months, and you'll have people in your area finding volunteer opportunities. So we want to get as many as we can. So I wanted to show you all a little sneak peek of this commercial. You're going to be the first group to ever see it. So this is what the commercial is going to look like. And then when you see it on your TV in June, you'll say, oh yeah, I know all about that. So here it is.
Did you know September 11th is a National Day of Service? We invite you to be kind with Volunteer West Virginia, because every mountaineer has the power to make a difference. Join in our statewide Day of Service. Whether it's lending a hand or spreading kindness, in West Virginia, every mountaineer is a volunteer. Visit volunteer.wv.gov to find a volunteer opportunity near you. Brought to you by Volunteer West Virginia, the West Virginia Broadcasters Association, and this station.
So every volunteer is a mountaineer. That's one of our new sayings. So we would love your help posting and sharing your volunteer opportunity to connect volunteers to it. So at the end of today's webinar, visit our website.
Did you?
This is what it'll look like. You're going to click that big green button that says Need Volunteers to post your opportunity. And it's really easy. We wanted to make it as simple as possible. So there's no login required. It's a form. You fill it out, and then we'll share your opportunity. And it takes less than 5 minutes to post a volunteer opportunity. After you fill out that form, it'll get sent to Gina, who's on today's call, and she reads over it, makes sure all the information is correct, and then it's published on our website. So just a quick commercial for that. So without any further ado, I'm really excited to introduce today's topic. It is the top 8 mistakes made after winning the grant that jeopardize your future funding. And we have an expert in the field. It's going to be presented by Nikki Bentley Colehart from the Grant Advantage. She's located in Buchanan, and she has over 20 years research, drafting, and submitting grant proposals. One of the facts I love about Nikki is that she has a track record of receiving 70% of the grant proposals submitted, securing over $28 million in grant funding for nonprofits and higher education institutes in West Virginia since 2000. So she's an expert in the field. Before that, she has a bachelor and master's degree in social work from West Virginia University, and she honed her grant writing skills with over 27 years as a social worker, employed in various West Virginia social and agencies, human services agencies throughout the state. So Nikki has a lot of experience writing grants and in the field. So we're really lucky to have her today, and she's going to be hosting this training for you all. And before I pass it over to Nikki and the spirit of today's training, it's all about mistakes. She's going to share some mistakes that she's seen firsthand, so you don't have to make up. And the wonderful thing about mistakes and challenges is mistakes have the power to turn you into something better than you were before. So today we're going to be looking at mistakes with a new lens and using it to hone your grant writing skills. So that's just a little bit about today's webinar. And now I'm going to pass it over to Nikki to introduce herself and to share her slides. Welcome, Nikki.
Hello, everybody. As Dana said, I'm Nikki, and today we're going to talk about mistakes that get made after the grant is awarded and how that can jeopardize future funding opportunities for you. In addition to being a grant writer, I also have been a grant manager in nonprofits and understand what it's like day to day on the ground, trying to get everything accomplished, yet still managing what's going to happen in the future and things like that. So we're going to talk about some of those topics today. So we need to remember first, if this thing, I should make the slide start. There we go. Okay. We should remember first that winning the grant is not the end of the process, but it's the beginning to the next funding request. So we have to look at our plan for every grant we do is how is this going to impact the next grant we want to get, right? Because they all fit in together. Unfortunately, the world doesn't work to where you can just write one grant and it runs your organization for the rest of the time, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about how we could do that. All right, so once you get the grant, what you do at this point matters. It matters to the clients and communities that you serve because they need the services. Obviously, the grant was funded, so therefore it is a needed, valued, it's been validated by a funder that this is a good project and needed. It matters to your staff because a lot of times staff are paid on grants, and it matters to your agency as far as how you can grow and expand your services. It matters to the funder. You know, they've entered into a contract with you now with this grant to say, you know, you're going to carry out, you've presented this nice solution to us and we want to be part of that. And it matters how you carry that out. And then it matters to prospective funders in the future because you're creating a baseline and learning lessons as you go through this grant opportunity that can help develop the next one that you're going to write. Okay. Okay. So my structure for today, we're going to talk about the mistakes. We're going to look at 8 common mistakes that happen after you get the grant. I have seen some of these I've made myself. Some of these I see when I'm working with nonprofits and we're doing some technical assistance or grant writing moving forward. And so we're going to look at those most common ones that I see. We're also going to talk about what we tell ourselves to justify those mistakes. How we feel that, no one makes a mistake on purpose, right? When we make an action, we justify it to ourselves that this is why we're doing this or why we're not doing something, right? So we're going to talk about those justifications. Then we're going to talk about the risks that are associated with each of these mistakes and then what we should do instead so that we can leave here with a better plan of action to move forward. Now, I am not saying every nonprofit makes all of these mistakes, but I would venture a guess that most of us have made at least one of these, right? So as we go through, everything is divided up by each mistake, and then we're going to talk about the justifications, risks, and what we should do instead for each one. If you have a question, please drop it in the chat, and we will get to that as we go through. If we are running low on time, I might say let's move forward and we'll take more questions at the end, but please feel free to jump in and ask questions as you have them. Okay, so the first mistake I commonly see and have been guilty of myself is failure to acknowledge the award, right? So basically there's 2 types of people, those who expect a thank you note and those who don't, right? And we all know people who are both. We should assume that foundations, corporations, and grants they're the people who expect a thank you note of some kind. Now, why don't we? What's our justification for not acknowledging? Part of it's pride. We say, hey, we worked really hard on this grant proposal. We earned this grant. So, they're lucky to partner with us. We don't say that, but somewhere in our head, we feel we're celebrating, we're excited, we've got this money coming in, and we earned it. And sometimes we're like, of course they funded us. We're awesome. We do. We change the world. We change families. We change pets outcomes. We change our communities. And sometimes the justification is just the realization of, oh crap, now we have a lot of work to do and I'm not ready to face it. So we kind of just don't do anything with it. But failure to acknowledge it comes with some risks. It can make a bad impression with the funder, especially for foundation funders and family foundations in particular. My experience has been they expect the notes. They remember when they don't get them. They may bring it up to your staff the next time. Well, did you receive the check? Or did you, was it able to do what you wanted it to do? Because sometimes the family foundations just send you a check up front and they don't request a whole lot of reporting on the back end. But if you take this opportunity to create that relationship with the foundation, it will help you in future grants. If you don't acknowledge it, it's a missed opportunity to gain insight from the program officer or the foundation itself to know kind of what they're looking at. So sending a little note can open up the door. When I refer to a program officer, I'm mainly talking about state grants and federal grants because they have, and larger foundations, they'll have a designated person who is over this particular pot of funds, and you get the chance to talk to them, and then you can lean on them as you go through the program. We'll talk more about that as we go forward. And foundation board members often remember a lack of appreciation during the funding round, and I have seen that cause an impact on future funding, whether the money gets reduced the next go around or they, make a comment about a lack of communication, or, they're not sure that they got their return on investment that they were hoping because that wasn't there. So those are the risks that you run. So what should we do instead? For foundation gifts and grants, the best practices are to mail a thank you note. Now, if you have nice handwriting, a little card from the dollar store, you can get little packs of 8 or 10 for a little bit of nothing. Just handwrite out a little note. Thank you for the funding. It was received, and as promised, or as laid out in the proposal, that we hope your donation will make an impact to whatever the impact is. That's all it has to say. One paragraph on a note card. If your handwriting is not legible or you're not comfortable with writing things out, a mailed letter is just, something on letterhead is just as sufficient. But I would send something out for every foundation gift or grant I received. And I would try and do that within 10 days of receipt. Closer, I think best practices are 48 hours or so. But, put that on your to-do list once you get a grant, just to acknowledge it. Corporate giving grants, if you get a grant from a corporation, Lowe's or Walmart or, I don't know, any of the corporations that we often go to, send them an email thank you note, say, thank you, we've received the gift or received the documentation. And again, thanks to your donation, we'll be able to create whatever outcome or solution you proposed. Now, state and federal grants, they don't necessarily expect a thank you note, but it is good practice to send an email acknowledgement to the program officer that, yep, we've received the award documents and, we thank you for your confidence in our program. We'll reach out to you if we have questions as we're processing the paperwork. And then usually you just get an email back that says, thank you. But now they have your name, you have a contact person, that's a good email address, and then you can have access to that program officer as you go through your program, which becomes important as you move through and make implement your program, because things will happen and you'll need that program officer to help you troubleshoot problems as they come up. All right, so for mistake 1, acknowledging the gift, pretty self-explanatory. Any questions related to that at this time? Okay, I'm going to go forward. I think that's the easy one. All right, mistake number 2. I see this one quite a bit. Failure to review the terms and conditions of the award. When you get a new grant from foundations, usually you get a check and a letter. Sometimes there's a form you need to sign that says you've received it and you send it back. For state, federal grants, there's usually an award packet that you need to look through, whether it comes by email or mail, and then you'll get reimbursed for your expenses later. But there's always terms and conditions. What happens commonly is people go, yay, we got the grant, but we're too busy doing the good work right now. I'll get to it later. And then before you know it, I'll get to it later is 3 months down the road, right? Or we got the money. Now there's time to figure out the details later. Let's just start spending and not looking at all the terms and conditions. And sometimes we just say to ourselves, I've had lots of grants before. They're all the same. I don't need to review these, right? We tell ourselves these things. But the risks when you do that is there may be requirements or deadlines that get missed. It can delay the program start or the release of funding. Sometimes in the award documents, there'll be special terms and conditions, and notice that they've changed things over to a new, even if somebody you've had money for years, maybe they've moved over to a new payment system and you have to go in and set up a new account, or they are requiring everybody to complete a survey before they're going to release the funding, or they want to have input into how press releases look before you release an acknowledgement of the gift. Some want to be anonymous. Foundations sometimes don't want their name out there. So it may say in the letter that comes with the check that please do not publicly acknowledge our gift. We don't want, we want to remain anonymous. Sometimes the terms and conditions will say you have 10 days to turn in this paper, 30 days usually, to respond and accept this grant. And if you fail to do so, you're technically declining the funding and they'll give it to somebody else. Those don't happen very often, but I've seen a handful of those. So it is important to look at that. Sometimes they want information on who is the financial person versus who is the program officer versus, or the project director versus who is a backup person to contact in case there's a problem on the grant. And sometimes they want all that information before they'll release money or open up the portal so you can request reimbursements. Sometimes grants will also, even though they're mostly reimbursable, they'll offer an opportunity for an advanced payment for startup. and that'll be in the terms and conditions. It may not be listed in the guidelines when you write the grant, but in the terms and conditions of award, it may say if you would like to request up to a certain percentage of the funds in advance, then you need to request it this way. And sometimes people miss out on that opportunity because they haven't read the guidelines to see what's going on. The guidelines will also lay out what reports are due when, what performance measures they want to see measured, all the kind of thing should be in the guidelines, and it's important to review them. And we all have made the mistake of just assuming things are in there, not in there. And when you call that program officer the first time, they'll say, "Did you review the packet?" So read it first before you call them. That's true. All right, now how do we avoid these risks? Take the 15 minutes it takes to sit and read through the conditions. You don't have to have time to act on it right away, but you need to take the few minutes just to read it, make some notes, put a sticky note on there with some actions you need to do, add it to your to-do list, something just to know what's in there. Part of the time it's going to be, here's your check, thank you very much, good luck. And that's no big deal, but you've read it, you know. Sometimes there'll be the other details and you need to take notes of those deadlines to accept the award, for setting up accounts in their funding portals, any regulations to the press releases, any training that's coming. Sometimes they'll have a mandatory training that everybody needs to go to before they'll release money. So those kind of things are all important to note. And if they ask for anything to be returned back to them, please just send it by the time they ask for it. This is another chance to make that good first impression with the funder and say, yep, we've read everything, we comply, we've signed what we needed, and we sent it back. Program officers don't want to have to chase you down and find out where something is. And again, it just delays your funding coming to you, and which then delays the program going out to the people who needed it, which is the reason you wrote the grant in the first place. So some easy steps to take care of that. Read, take notes, and move forward. Any questions on the terms and conditions of award? Or has anybody seen something really strange in their terms and conditions? Yeah, all right. Quiet group today. All right, so mistake number 3, not being able to track expenses and matching funds by categories. This is a big one. Sometimes startup nonprofits or smaller groups that are mostly volunteers or have 1 or 2 employees write grants, but they don't really have the accounting software on the back end to track what is going to be required to complete the grant. Sometimes you get the grant and then the justification for not having that system in place is, I just didn't think that far ahead. I didn't know we were going to have to track things that way. Accounting software is expensive. And I'll just keep a spreadsheet, which is fine if you only have 1 grant coming in and everything's coming out of the same funding source, or if you don't have any grants and you're just managing donations coming in, a spreadsheet might be enough. With your bank account and a spreadsheet, you can keep track of what's where. But once you have grant funding, the expectation is that you'll be able to track every expense that leaves your organization by which grant is paying for it and what line item it's coming out of or what category. So for instance, if you write a check or you do a direct deposit for payroll, you have to be able to show in your accounting that that payroll came out of 60% from the Department of Education grant and 40% from the Foundation of Founders. I don't know, whatever foundation it is. And without some form of accounting software, that becomes hard to do, and it creates a lot more work if you have to keep separate spreadsheets. I've seen some early nonprofits set up a new bank account for every grant they get. That's not necessary. If you have an accounting system in place, then you can attach funds and tags and create the system so that it'll generate reports for you and be able to answer those questions. But it is essential that you have some form of software that can do that. So the risks. Without some kind of accounting system, your reporting becomes very difficult. You're not able to tell what's gone from one category to the other, which grant. Tracking your impact of that funding becomes difficult because you don't know how much money you spent from this grant on this project. If you have a food pantry and you don't know how much money you're spending on food versus hygiene items versus, maybe some transportation assistance, then you don't know what to ask for the next year when you go to ask for funding, because you don't know what it costs. But if you can break it down and say that, Foundation A gave us $25,000, and we know that 30% of that went to food and 40% of that went to transportation, and the rest went to hygiene or, medical costs, then how to ask for the next grant. Without an accounting system, you can over or underspend your grant budget. And then when it's time to get your reimbursement, there's not enough money in the pot, and then you have to pay for that somehow. Or if you underspend, then it appears to the funder you didn't really need that much money. So the next year you may not get as much. They'll cut your budget because you didn't spend it all. You could be out of compliance with state or federal funding regulations. And that means you could have to pay back the money that you've already spent because you can't prove that the expenses went where you said they were going to go. You can get a bad audit. If you are a nonprofit that has more than $500,000 in federal funding, you have to have an audit each year. Or sometimes agencies will do like a desk review or ask for reports. And if you can't provide that information, then it increases your risk for a bad review. And that makes you a higher financial risk for future funding. And a lot of foundations are now funders are now asking for financial risk assessments, and they want to know that your policy is in place, that your accounting system can track by grant and line item expenses and income coming in. So those are some of the risks that I do see. I've had some funders or some nonprofits that I'm working with have funders say, I'm sorry, we can't give you more money because you couldn't track where we spent the last one, or it's too high of a risk. You need to go back and work on these things and then come back to us. So that's one of the things. So how do we get around this? You have to have some kind of accounting software, some kind of system that creates different funds or accounts and tags or something so you can track income and expenses by each funding source and each category. You need to consider this just as a necessary cost of doing business, just like you do the utilities in your facility that you use, just like you do in the, either rent space or you own a building. It's just as important. If you plan on growing your grant base or growing your funding base, this is a necessary cost of doing business. The good news is you can check prices in collective groups that can help bring the cost down. For instance, if you are if you're a small college and you're part of the, what's it called? The West Virginia, there's a group of independent colleges and universities in West Virginia, and they've gone together to buy certain software that they can share across multiple groups. If you're part of an affiliation of any kind, sometimes they have a system that you can buy into at a reduced rate. And also as a nonprofit, you're eligible for a lot of things through TechSoup that have reduced rates. I know they have QuickBooks, which is a program that can do most everything. There's QuickBooks for nonprofits that can do most everything that you need to do to be compliant. And they have a reduced rate through TechSoup. So check that out if you haven't. And then once you have some kind of a system in place, consider if you have the funding or you have a volunteer on your board, some kind of accountant to help you set up those accounts first to get them set up right. And then once they're set up, then you just follow the process. It's all in there and it just becomes a habit. So, when someone submits a purchase order, you're getting ready to cash a check, that you have some kind of paperwork that says this is coming out of this grant and it gets applied to their supply line from that grant. And then the accounting system will deduct it from what's available. And then you know how much you have left and you know how much you've spent in different categories. So when you work on your next grant, you have that information to help inform what you really need. And it can be very, very important. So
can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
It's Mark Staples. We're fairly new, and we're receiving one of our first smaller grants too. We had some other ones that we're waiting to hear from. You mentioned TechSoup. Could you spell that, or will we get those notes later?
Yep, it's in the slide. It's TECHSOUP, and I believe it's .com.
Okay.
And somebody tell me, is it a membership? Do you sign up as a membership, or you just join for free? And it gives you a reduced rate. They pull together software, like you can get Microsoft Office at a discounted rate, and QuickBooks and Adobe and lots of other programs that are kind of cost prohibitive for a smaller nonprofit, but they have a lot of good deals because they get those collective agreements to buy it at a cheaper rate and help nonprofits access it.
Great.
So
Thank you very much.
it's a really good resource.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions on your being able to track information or horror stories that anybody would like to share of not being able to do that?
I have a
We
question.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Anita. We are new to getting some software to track this. This is our first year of really going after multiple grants. We're used to just managing maybe a couple or three, and this year it's going to be like 6 or 7. And I am a volunteer, and I'm the person who volunteers to keep track of all these things. So I don't want it to get hairy on me and get crazy because we have a lot of funding to spend. And so you recommend this QuickBooks. Is there like and I don't know anything about this, okay? So I'm just gonna throw this out there. Is Quicken another software that can be used?
I believe so. There's lots of them. I'm not recommending QuickBooks. It's just a name that I know that's out there.
Okay.
There are other systems that are made specifically for nonprofits that are more expensive.
Okay.
So there's lots of resources out there. If you look at a system, though, you just need to make sure that you can enter kind of a budget of what's available in the grant. You can break it down by line items and the categories within the grant. Like if you said you'd pay for this is for paying a veterinarian for spay and neuters, and this is for marketing and advertising, and then this amount is for food, dog food, and things that we're going to distribute. As long as you can break it down by those categories, then you would be able to do the reports. As long as that system can do those things, you should be okay. And it will save you a lot of headaches down the road if you can find a way to invest in it early.
We just started spending last month, so we haven't gotten several of our bigger grants, and I want to get ahead of this before it gets ugly. So,
and if and there's lots of different software out there. I don't know them all, but I would start with TechSoup to look and see what's available. I would also talk to, if you have an accountant or a financial advisor, talk to them, see what they would recommend based on your particular circumstances. I'm not an accountant, I'm a social worker. But I do see that that would be a good place to start.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else questions on what the basics are that you need for your tracking, or what kinds of systems don't work? Having a separate bank account for every grant, you're spending a lot of money on fees. By the time you did all that, you could have paid for the software. But I do see people trying to do that. Because that's when a funder says you can't commingle funds, that doesn't mean the funds can't be in the same bank account. It means that they can't be spent. You have to be able to track each grant separately. You can't just say, I spent so much money on personnel and I don't know where it came from, somewhere out of here. You got to be able to say that, I spent, 50% of it came from this fund, 20% from this fund, and whatever from the other. So That's one of the differences, but that's a misunderstanding. A lot of people see commingling and think they have to have a separate bank account. Now, there are 1 or 2 grants out there that I have seen that do require a separate bank account, but those are very, very, very rare. And it'll say specifically, we want this. But most of the time you can put them all in one account and just track them with your software. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. But please feel free to add questions in the chat box or raise your hand or jump in. I can't see everybody, so please just, unmute yourself and speak or add it in the chat box. Okay, mistake number 4. This is a big one. I want to talk about this for a while. Avoiding problems when they arise or hiding hiccups and delays from funders. We think to ourselves, we don't want the funder to know that we've had a problem. That could make a bad impression. Or we'll figure it out before the grant ends. We'll find a way to figure this out. Sometimes we think, maybe no one will notice. We're just going to keep on keeping on. And sometimes the truth is we just have no idea where to begin. We've hit this roadblock. And I don't want to tell the funder because we're going to look incompetent that we don't know how to handle this. None of those are actually true when it comes to funders. Funders want to know what's going on. They're your partner in this project. If you succeed, they succeed. If you feel like you're at risk of failing, you want to pull them in and say, okay, hey, we've hit a roadblock. What do we do? What are our options? And most funders work with multiple nonprofits across the country or across the state, and they've pretty much any problem you can come up with, they've seen before. I've seen programs where they're developing a program and then they had a fire and they lost all their data and they lost all their stuff. So they had to kind of start over. And the funder was like, sure, we'll work with you. I've seen people have, you develop a program based on one staff person's expertise and experiences, and then that staff person moves on to another job. So then you have nobody in the organization who can do what they were doing. So now what do we do? It can be things such as from the time we wrote the grant until now when we got the money, prices have increased significantly, and we didn't put enough money in this line item to buy the piece of equipment we need or the vehicle we thought we were going to get. And so what do we do? So instead of just not buying the vehicle or, hiding and saying, well, I guess we can't finish this project, you talk to the funder and they can help you walk through that and say, okay, here's some options. We could do these things. And we'll talk some more about that when we get to the next step. Other hiccups that happen are, there was, after the pandemic, there was a lot of supply chain issues and things were delayed. And one piece of the project had to be done after this piece, but we couldn't get this piece because it was held up. So then you can talk to the funder and say, can we get a time extension to finish this project because this was delayed? Or sometimes the problems that seem huge to you are very common that the grant funders are used to hearing, and just picking up the phone and calling them, they know they can walk you through, oh, well, then you need to do this, this, and this. And it can be taken care of in a week. But we tend to avoid them and hide them and not let people see our challenges and our scars as we're going through this process. But funders see these as lessons learned and ways, as long as you can problem solve them and get through them, they want to be part of the partnership in making that happen, right? So don't be afraid to ask and don't be afraid to explain what's going on. Because when we hide them, the program's going to keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And again, that impacts your agency, your staff, your clients, and the communities that you serve. The whole purpose of getting the grant was to make a difference. We're all in this business because we want to make a difference. And when we're hiding those problems that we have, it slows down the program. The program can slow to a complete halt. I've seen that happen. And then the clients and communities cannot receive the benefit. Or the program cannot meet the goals that you laid out because there's a huge problem in the middle. That big elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about is going to stop us from reaching the goals we wanted to. So we need to figure out how to train that elephant and get it to do what we want it to do. And you also risk being out of compliance and having to pay money back. It's much easier to face that problem. Another problem that happens sometimes is, we go into something and then we realize, oh, we don't quite have all the expertise we thought we did to be able to carry this out. We need some more training. And that means we're going to need a little bit more time to figure out what we're going to do. Admit that. Talk to the funder about that. Say, we're gonna change some things here a little bit and move forward. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, great, that's fine. We still have time. The earlier, the better. You can't wait until the last, 2 months of a 1-year project and say, oh, by the way, we had a problem. Then it's too late. Then they're going to go, well, there's not much we can do about it. Maybe we can give you a little bit of an extension, but, if you had talked to us sooner, we could have solved some problems. It's very rare that you would get more money, but sometimes that can happen if that's the problem. So what you should do, I recommend on every type of grant, every program, not necessarily every grant, but every program that's part of your organization, that you have some form of an advisory group that can help you identify barriers, problem solve and create solutions. Now, that does not mean you have to have a formal committee and you have to have a formal board for every program, but you have to have a team of people that you can talk to problem solve issues as they come up, because they're going to come up. I was working with a group that was doing some kind of it was a USDA project, and it involved growing crops. And so they had to have they had a drought. And so then things weren't going to grow. So then they had to figure out an alternative way to grow things indoors that were normally grown outdoors and find some other options. But they were able to get to a solution, and the funder was happy with it, and it moved on. But our tendency is to say, oh, there's a drought, there's nothing we can do about it, we're done. And just kind of stop. Don't stop. Keep working, keep problem solving, and find out what you can do. Find those trusted advisors. And a lot of times, those are the people we serve. People who've been successful through our programs. People who live in our community and have firsthand knowledge of what's going on. They've probably faced these barriers before. And working together, you can find out what's working, what's not working, and create solutions. Again, when you hit a problem, go back to those grant terms and conditions that we talked about earlier that we didn't read and see if there's any troubleshooting problems in there. Sometimes there will be explanations about how to, it might say specifically, if the key personnel leaves, these are the steps you need to go through to assign a new person. Or if, you're allowed to give yourself a 6-month time extension, you just have to notify us that you're going to opt in to take that choice. Those kind of things may be in your terms and conditions, depending on the funder. But the best thing to do is just keep that communication going with your program officer or the funder and just ask for guidance. Most grants will allow, with prior approval, time extensions. They can give you more time to finish the project that you're working on. And those have to be based on some kind of need. So you do have to justify why you need it. And some of these problems that you've hit are the justification. Time extensions are not generally awarded just because, oh, we haven't gotten to that yet. You have to explain what's happened. Budget adjustments. If you planned most of your money to be in staffing and a little bit for program supplies, but you realize you need more program supplies, and it took you 2 months longer to hire somebody than you thought, you've got more money in your personnel line item than you do in your supplies. So therefore, you can go back to the funder and say, hey, can we shift money from this category to that category? And then we'll be able to do the project in the same amount of time. Usually they're going to say yes. And that's a quick way to fix that problem. If there's changes in the scope of work and the plan of what you're going to do, you need to go back and explain to the funder what happened. This is what happened. This is what we're going to do. We just want approval to make this change. Again, if it's based on a need and it's a plan that is in line with the overall goal of the project, they'll usually approve that. Change in scope can be everything from, we originally planned doing 4 of these workshops. However, we cannot get a venue for the third quarter that we were planning to do this, so we would like to change our scope to 3, and instead we want to offer a networking session in the community at a different time. And usually they'll say, okay, that's fine, that'll still help you reach your goals. It can't be something like, we plan to build a building and now we've got 3 months left, we're not going to be able to build the building, so we want to buy a van. That might not fly. If you're talking to them early on and say, the property we hope to buy, by the time the grant money came in, was gone, and so now we're looking for another piece of property, we're going to have a little delay. Tell them early. Let them know that up front, and they'll work with you. It's when you don't tell them and you can't get the project done that they get less pleased with you and less likely to give you more money in the future. But as long as you communicate, have them remember they're your partner in this program, then things will go much, much faster and better. So, any questions about that? I know that most of us are Appalachians. I'm here in Buchanan, been in West Virginia all my life, and we do have a little bit of pride, and we do have a little bit just a cultural challenge of asking for help, right? This is one circumstance where it is a best practice and it is in your best interest to just communicate with the funder and be honest about it and ask for help. You don't have to do it all alone, right? They're your partner. They're going to help you through this. All right. Any questions about hiding and avoiding problems? Am I going too quickly? Is there anything anybody wants me to go back for? Okay. All right. So mistake number 5 is not spending the money you got. We will tell ourselves we don't want to waste the funding or look desperate by spending it too quickly. Sometimes it's just, I'll get around to setting up the accounts later. We don't need it quite yet, so we're going to hold on to it until we have a greater need. We're just going to save it for a rainy day. That works wonderful for your personal budget and maybe your organizational budget to have a rainy day fund. For a grant, that's not good. They gave you the money, they want you to spend it, they want you to carry out the goals and objectives. The assumption is that you asked for the amount of money that you need and that money is going to be spent in the time frame you set out. So not spending the money becomes a red flag for the funders. And it creates risks in, again, a delay in the program getting started, a delay in creating impacts and tracking your results, and a delay in the impact on that community and clients and families and everybody that you're working with. Another risk is a funder thinks you really didn't need the money, or you're not capable of managing grant funding. So therefore, you may not be a good investment for the next time money comes around. And sometimes future funders may see you as a high-risk organization and be less likely to give you money. Sometimes foundations will ask, can you give us an example of a prior grant that you've had? I've had this happen recently, actually, on a Department of Labor grant. Tell us about a grant that you've had, how much the budget was, and what percentage of those funds you spent by the end of the grant. And they expect that to be at 100%, right? They want to see that you're using the money that they give you. And that actually becomes one of the criteria that they look at before whether they give you more funding. So what you should do, only ask for the grant money you need, right? Spend the money at a steady pace, which is based on the program proposal. Now, that doesn't mean that every month you should spend the exact amount of money the same, because, if you're offering a summer camp, more of the money's going to be spent in the summertime, a little bit probably in the spring while you're recruiting and you're getting supplies in and you're setting things up, and a little bit in the fall when you're doing some evaluations and looking at how things went. But most of your money is going to be spent in the summer. That makes sense. But if your program is to do a year-round parenting class, and participants are going to do you're going to have 4 cohorts that go through a 12-week session, the money should be spent pretty consistently throughout the whole year, right? So depending on what you proposed in your project, you want to spend money at a steady pace. And you want to document that spending and turn in all of your financial reports. Now, foundations, sometimes community foundations, they'll just give you a check and they don't want a whole lot of reporting back. More and more, they want some kind of a summary of how the money was used. You may be able to include, all the touchy-feelies. We do a case management or a case study that shows, little Susie came to the program and she had challenges with handwriting, and now she's gone through this program and she is up a grade level in school and she's done really, really well. Those are great reports, but we also want to know what money was spent. On the grant side, they want to know how the dollars were spent and how that had a role in the impact. So, we were able to provide her with occupational therapy. We could pay for her services that her family could not afford, or we were able to buy some writing aids that she could use to work on her handwriting or whatever the case may be. They want to know those kind of details. And then it also helps you plan for the next one because you know how much things cost. And, this was really successful based on this. This section wasn't. We spent too much money in this area. We could have got along away, could have figured out how to spend a little bit less here and had a bigger impact on the back end of things. So, the more information that you have, the better you'll be off. And again, communicate with the funder about any challenges or delays in spending. We've already talked about that. It's important just to let them know that those funds are going to be spent. If they haven't been, this is what happened. We couldn't hire somebody in time, or we had a delay. We hired somebody, but they didn't take the job, so now we got to advertise again. All those kind of things are real world issues. Funders know that. And just remember that there are no bonus points in the grant for having a balance at the end of the grant. They want you to spend it. They want you to spend what they give you. That's why they gave it to you. Some grants are, it depends on the program timeline. You may have 3 months to spend it. You may have 3 years to spend it. It just depends on the type and scope of the project. But you want to spend the money down. It's not to your advantage to have money left over. You got to pay it back or you can't draw it down. You don't get to use it. And it can be used in your community if you spend it. Questions on mistake number 5 or comments? Nobody? Okay, moving on. Missing report deadlines.
Here we do have a comment. Okay.
Yes.
I'm midway through my project and I find out that Susie is having 2 additional problems. That's going to cost us more money.
Yes.
How do I come back and ask for more money?
Okay, there are a couple options. One is to just communicate with your funder, communicate with the foundation and say, hey, this has happened. Do you have any other resources? Is it possible to request more money? Most of the time, they're going to say no. We have to go to our next grant cycle. So then your plan is you take the data that you have from what you've been working on and you find another funder that's going to come in and fund that project. Or you shift your budget around to say, okay, it's going to cost me more to help her. So I got to take it out of somewhere else in the budget and get permission to move money from one section of the budget to another. But normally they're not going to throw extra money to you, which is why it's important when you're planning your budget that you're as accurate as you can be.
But then I'm not in compliance with the shortfall that I have created to help Susie. What am I going to do?
You need to communicate with the funder and say, this is what's happened. She needed more services than we anticipated. And if they give you permission to shift that money and maybe reduce the number of people you're going to serve by 2, or whatever the case may be, then you're still in compliance because they've given you approval. You become out of compliance when you don't have approval when you do it anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, grants are not like private donors and investors. You can go back to a private donor and investors in your corporation and say, hey, we've got this problem right now. Can you help us solve this short-term problem? And they'll give you more money if you have those relationships with people who are making direct donations to you. That's where I would go in that kind of circumstance. But when it comes to the grant itself, it's very rare that they're going to have an extra pot of money just sitting there to add to it. Now, sometimes they can. Sometimes someone has declined a grant that was awarded for lots of different reasons, and there is some money left over, and they will work with you. So you have to talk to you be honest with the program officer and say, hey, or the grant officer and say, hey, this is what's happened. Is there any chance for more funding? If they say yes, they'll tell you the process to go through it. If they say no, say, well, can we shift money within this project to go from one thing to another within the same grant? And they'll say yes or no. And then if not, then you're going to have to find money elsewhere, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, I don't have better news there, but yep, that's kind of how it works. And, part of the reason is it's not that funder's responsibility to manage your organization. That's what you're showing them that you can do. And so they want to see that you can problem solve and that you're willing to work with you, and then they'll, but it's not their job to fix your organization's problems. They can guide you through some things, but that's part of the organizational management. Okay. All right. So missing reports and deadlines. This is common. Unfortunately, I've done it before. It happens. And I would just, justify to myself, well, we didn't spend much money this month, so they don't really need a report yet. I'll put it on the next report. Or we really haven't had enough time to show our progress yet, so I don't want to report and look like we're not doing anything. That doesn't matter. They want to see where you are. They know that it takes time for things to happen. Touching base with them through these reports is the minimum amount of work you should do when you get a grant. If they request a report, turn it in when it's due. We also justify to ourselves, they're complicated. I'll do it later. I'll get to it when I get to it. More common than not, it's like, oops, is that due already? Or I have heard reports. What reports? They want us to report? Again, if you've read the terms and conditions when you get the grant, if they ask for any reports. Sometimes it's just at the end of the project, they want to know how it went. Sometimes they don't want anything, and sometimes they want to know a monthly report or a quarterly report on progress and how your finances are doing on that grant. It depends on the funding source. They're all slightly different. But by missing reports, the risks you have are for yourself, you don't really know how your program is performing, how much you're spending, and what impacts and outcomes are happening and what's been impacted by the report, the current status of the program. You miss opportunities to make corrections and adjustments if you don't have reports done in intervals. You can't identify the barriers to success and create an alternative plan to mediate those barriers or remove them if you don't do a report to see that they're there. Missing reports can also make your organization seem disorganized or ungrateful and not a sound investment in the future. And again, the reports are the minimum requirement to receive reimbursement payments. So if you have a reimbursable grant, some funders may not send the money out until you turn in that report. This is the part we all hate about grants. This is the part that is time consuming and burdensome, but it is important. But your reports don't have to be detailed. They don't have to be earth-shattering and changing. They can just be truly where we are. So what I like to do, my personal practice is when I have a report due, I put it in, I always have my phone with me, or I'm sitting at a laptop, or I have my iPad. So I have calendar reminders, and I'll set one out a week before the report's due and say, gather information for report due on such and such date. And then I have another reminder on the date that it's due. Because I found when I just put it on a week ahead of time, if I don't do it right at that moment, I forget again. But by having when the report's due coming up, I see it. And just get into the habit of having this. And the problem is when you have more than one grant, you have more than one report cycle. Some grants want to report every month. Some want something once a quarter. Sometimes the quarters are different. They're not necessarily the same as a calendar year every 3 months. They might be starting in October instead of starting in January, and you have one that starts in June. And so just having those reports calendars. Now, if you don't have your phone on you all the time, a wall calendar is just as efficient, or a list somewhere that you keep the master list of when everything's due. The most important thing on reports is to report at the time they request it, not so much what you're spending and what you've done. That becomes more important in your final report. So if in the first quarter of a grant you haven't spent anything yet, that's okay. Just explain why you haven't spent anything yet. Best practices are you spend regularly and at a regular pace. But if something has happened, we couldn't hire somebody, we had to re-advertise for the job, or the person who was supposed to do this has left the organization, explain that in your report and turn in a report of 0 expenses. Include actions that have been completed that may not have had a dollar amount per se. You may say, we developed some partnerships. We have signed an MOU with the school system to let us come in and do this program. We have advertised this, that, and the other thing, and now we're ready to hire staff. Or we've received resumes, but we haven't, and we're ready to getting ready to interview people. Those are all actions that you are completing toward the goal that the funder wants to see, even if you haven't spent any money. So please turn those reports in. It's a much bigger negative if you don't turn in the report than if you turn in a less than stellar report, right? So just turn them in. Be accurate and truthful, like we've talked about through all this. These are your partners in this project. They're there to help you get through this. So you want to be honest with them, and use these reports as a way to help plan for the next project and grant that you're working on. I had another thought in there and now I've forgotten it. Purchase equipment, develop things. Yeah, so it'll come back to me. But missing reports are a big no-no. But there's lots of things you can do. Get them in. Don't make them harder than they need to be. Don't overanalyze it. Just put the information in there. You want to have the expenses, if in the first quarter you've spent no money, but then in the second quarter you still haven't spent any money, then you may have a problem. Or if you spend a whole lot of money in the first quarter and you don't need, you're not going to need money later, that might be okay. But, make sure that you're looking at it. One of the reasons they ask you to do reports is that you yourself you as an organization have a chance to look at what's going on and evaluate what's happening and see what's working, what's not working. And then they can also see, is this program model that they've been funding what they want to continue to fund, or is it something that we can grow on and build? And we're seeing that, yeah, they need more money here. This, everybody's spending stuff down. It just depends on the project, and keep communication. Communication is key. All right. The next one is another thing that is a best practices out there. And let me back up. If you are on this call and like I've heard a couple people say, we only have one grant. Some of this may not apply to your one grant that you have, right? Because they don't ask for all this information. What I'm presenting is what, as you grow and expand and build, if you want to keep getting more money and keep getting more grants and keep growing, then these are the things that need to be in place and the mistakes you want to avoid. Because if you're always doing the same thing you're doing right now, you're always going to be where you are right now. focusing and being focused in on just today is not going to help you grow and develop. We need to look ahead. So that's kind of where we're at. So for those who are just starting out, don't get overwhelmed by this. This comes with time. And as you do more grants, these are things. But if you can lay some of these processes out now while you're small, it'll be easier to grow later. And those who are at the level where you have lots of grants coming in and you're getting the same grants year after year, the same kind, and you're ready to make the leap to the next level, then these are things that can help springboard you there. That's kind of where we're at. Okay. So mistake number 7. You don't have any documented impacts or outcomes achieved, or you don't reach them. We justify that by saying, we can't really document that because our project is different and it's hard to count the impact. I hear that a lot. And not every program can be different and hard to count the impact. There's lots of ways to do it. We'll talk about some ways to help you do that. But the expectation is if you're given money to carry something out, you got to be able to show what the impact is. When you write a grant, you're not writing a grant just for the need and the money. You're writing the grant to create a solution to a problem, to create an impact. And so as you go through your grant, you can't forget about that promised impact and solution. While we're busy day to day handling the money and making sure things are paid for and people are employed and services are being offered, those are very key pieces. But the end is why we got into this job in the first place, is to create an impact. And so we need to be able to measure that impact so that we can show what we've done. Now, measuring impact, a lot of people say we had people show up to our course, so their lives were definitely improved. And I used the wrong course word there, but I'll fix that. I know we handed out at least 1,000 pieces of information that had to create an impact. So think about the last time you were walking down the street and someone handed you a flyer. How much did that change your life? For some people, it did. Yes, absolutely. Some people take the time and they read it and they find something that they needed in that moment and they reach out to go to the next step. But most of us take it and go, thank you, and then it gets tossed away later, right? So handing out information alone doesn't create an impact. It's an action, it's an output, it's the service we're offering. Same thing with taking a course. People can be on this course right now. I can say we've had however many show up, but some people may be working on another project on the side. Some people may be asleep. Some people may be gathering, here saying, I already know this, so therefore it's no value to me. I can't show that this impacted somebody. I can show that this is a service we offer and this is a program we do, but it's up to you to then carry it out. So if I wanted to show impact for this particular presentation, I might include a follow-up survey in 3 months and say, did you implement any of the recommendations from this training? And if so, how did that impact your next funding options or something? Then I would have information that let me show an impact from this. Does that make sense? So one of the problems that I see is that we spend so much time, which is important, to track what we're doing and what the clients are doing, that we're not seeing how the clients have changed or the community has changed. And we want to be able to measure that. So sometimes we also tell ourselves, I don't want to pry into people's lives and ask too many questions. I don't want to ask them, did you eat more vegetables this week, like we talked about last week? Or did you go through, did you get a chance to register for that class? Did your business make any money this quarter? Did your pet's health improve? You don't necessarily want to ask. But sometimes we need to. That's part of the terms and conditions of what we do. We're in people's lives. What we do is somewhat intrusive, but it's intentional. And we want it to be impactful. We want it to make a change. Okay. So the risks of not being able to track that outcome, the impacts, That's what the funders expected to see. That's why they contributed to you. And not having any outcomes or not being able to prove that you had outcomes can reduce your future funding amounts, right? And you won't have the data that you need to apply to larger grants to grow your program. So if you're starting out in the program and you're able to serve 30 people right now, and those 30 people have, we know that because they've come through our recovery home, that they are having an impacted change in their life. They're now living on their own and those kind of things. They've got a job, they do all these things. But if you don't have any of that written down anywhere, or you don't have any way to gather that information, then it's hard to go back to the funder and say, hey, the 30 people that went through our program last year, 80% of them have now lived independently. We have 75 that reported sustained recovery for more than 60 days. We've had, those kind of things are impacts and outcomes. The fact that you gave them a ride to the jobs or to meet with landlords, those are outputs. When you talk about grants, there's two different main measurements that they want to see. Your outputs, and I like to reverse that and say the output is what we as an organization put out and what the clients put out toward the service, toward the goals. So we offer services, we offer programs, we offer transportation, we offer food, we offer support. The clients put into it, they show up, they complete tasks, they follow through with recommended suggestions, they take a class, they get a good grade. Those kind of things, those are, well, the good grade is an outcome, but they attend class, they attend our sessions. Those are what they put out and what we put out toward the goals. What the outcome is what comes out because we did those things. So if you reverse the word, if it comes out of there because we did those things, they have a good grade, they completed high school or technical college, or they got a job, they got housing, they have improved health. You've reduced your BMI, you've reduced your A1C, those things that have an impact on your life. That's what they want to know. So it's best practices to be able to track both. If you're only tracking what you're doing and how many people show up, you're missing a big piece and you're missing opportunities for future funding, because that's what people will invest in, are those solutions and those outcomes and those impacts. So you have to have a way to deliver that to a funder in a way that makes sense, with some data or charts or a story of a person who has overcome a challenge that going through your program, this is where their life has changed or the community has changed.
There's a quick question on the that was really good on the outputs, because that's usually easier. But on the outcomes and impacts, does it have to could you explain maybe what if there's qualitative and quantitative, which sometimes it's hard to show that in working with, say for instance, with youth that are younger, where adults we could use a survey or with a Likert scale or something like that, so it's more quantitative. Any suggestions on how to make a stronger plea for what we've done? And how do you, even with self-esteem with a little kid, or grades are one thing, yeah, we can see that with report card, but are there some other things you recommend that we could do, or that we have to create, or a website to go to get perhaps some more empirical, maybe qualitative or quantitative things to use for population?
Yeah, I recommend a couple things. First, start where you are and what you know. And if it's something that you can show through that qualitative measure, then that's an easy way to do it. You can tell the stories of people who are making a change. For quantitative numbers, there's a lot of work that's already been done out there. I go to Google and I'll look for free assessment tools, self-esteem teenagers, or free assessment tool for you can talk about ACEs and behavioral changes and things like that. There's tools out there already. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Most of them are free, or at a small charge that you can put into your grant and ask the grant to pay for that to help you measure it.
Okay.
Right? But yeah, that's what I recommend. And if nothing is out there because you're doing something that is really innovative and unique and you can't really, there's nobody else has done a quantification, then to me, you have an opportunity for a research project and a grant to say, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this, and we want to measure this change, and we're going to do it by, if we're talking about, it, does it have an impact on anything from, right now I have two, well, young adults now, they're both over 18, but they really, my teenagers really struggled with wanting to get a driver's license. The anxiety was extremely high on it. And the need, I don't need to go anywhere. I can talk to my friends all day online. And so maybe you have a program that the goal is to reduce anxiety. And one of the measurements of that is to show how it impacts their life and how many people get a driver's license as they come through your program. So that's an achievement that was challenging in the beginning. You can talk about people's and let me back up. For grants, you're not doing a, you're not writing a thesis. You're not writing your dissertation. This is a grant. It doesn't have to be as complicated unless you're going down the research route, then there's some other rules. But most of us, we just need to have something that we can prove made a change. So it could be perception. You give people, when they first start the program, you ask them 6 or 8 questions about how they feel about something. Then they go through your program, and at the end, you ask them again how they feel about something, and you can see if you've changed their perspective on that impact. For instance, maybe eating healthier is an easy one to measure. How many times a week do you eat fruits and vegetables? How do you feel about your confidence level in preparing fruits and vegetables for meals? And at the end, they go through your program, they learn about these things, and at the end, you ask them the same questions, and it shows that they have more confidence in it, and they're eating at least one day more a week of fruit and vegetable. Then you've made an impact. It doesn't have to be that you have changed their entire life, but it can be simpler on a grant than it would be if you're doing a dissertation. You don't need to have a control group and an intervention group like you would in a formal research project, unless you're doing a research grant, but most of us aren't. Most of us are doing a service and a program, and we want to show that there's an impact. Now, for those of you who do work in higher ed and have that experiences with dissertations, we don't have to worry as much about correlation and causation at the agency level. We can say it probably impacted it. It's probably good enough. You're not gonna be able to control for all variables, but for a grant, we did this, we saw this change. That's what we're going to show. This program has some change, and that's enough for a grant.
Great. That helps a lot. That makes a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. And that's another thing. Here in a minute, I'm going to open up the floor and we'll talk about some specific programs and see if we can help you come up with some ideas of how to track some changes. But what we should be doing is define those outcomes and impacts from the beginning of the project. That should be what you do when you write the grant, because that's what sells your program, is the solutions and the impacts you're going to make. And that's what people want to be a partner with. You can develop and adopt a way to track it, because everything is measurable. Everything out there has some measurability. And we'll talk, I'm going to open up the floor here in a minute to help people walk through finding some ways to measure it. You want to consider purchasing or finding pre-developed and validated assessment tools. Like I said, I Google what I'm looking for and see what shows up. And you can put that in as an allowable cost on your grant as part of your assessment tools that you're going to use. So if it does cost, if it costs $70 a year to get 50 of these assessment worksheets that we can use, then just put that in your grant. Or if it costs, $300 to have a subscription to this online service that will do the math for you on those surveys, or an app that people can go to and fill it out themselves and it'll analyze it for you, put that in your grant. Those are allowable costs. You want to report all outputs and outcomes. Like I said, those outputs, the things that you do, and the outcomes, what happens because you did, even if they're less than you originally planned, right? We're going to use the data that we tell the grants we're going to serve 100 people, and then we realize it's more intensive, and so we're only able to serve 70. That's okay. You can put that in there. And as long as you're communicating that throughout, that this is the thing that we have, and these are the lessons we've learned. We've learned that doing giving somebody food doesn't necessarily mean they eat it, but having them come to a meal, we can show that they've increased their nutrition because they had some fruits and vegetables today. We've learned that that's more expensive for us to cook the meal because we got to have staff here to cook it. And we got to have people here to, serve the food. But in our community, we know that this is something that we need to do. So that's a lesson learned. And we're going to use that as we go forward. Instead of promising to serve more people, we're going to serve fewer people more intently. Those are all allowable things, right? So anything that we document, we use that as data to report on and to develop new programs. So at this point, let's just talk a little bit about measuring. Does anybody have a circumstance or a particular piece of a project that you aren't really quite sure how you track it, and you want some ideas from me or from the group of something that they've done? And it's okay to share because we've all been there. I'll give you some examples to get us started. If you are offering, you're building a playground, right? You can track the physical activity level of students who use it, because before they were, kept inside all day because there was nowhere safe for them to play outside. Now we know that they get 20 minutes a day of physical activity on the playground. That's something you can measure. And you can measure how many kids feel healthy, or they say they feel better, or they feel excited after they come in the playground, or whatever. Or if it's about the fact that the community itself didn't have anywhere for kids to go that was safe, and now we have this playground, and we can show that the community has been improved because we have feedback from families that they use this on the weekend, and that they're satisfied with having an additional resource. Those kind of things can be measured. How do you get that information? You can send out surveys. You can put it on social media and just ask people to put in ask a question on Facebook and say, answer yes or no below, and then have somebody track those numbers. You can do a focus group where you bring those parents together and let them talk about what it was like before and what it's like now. You can take individual comments that your staff hear and just write them down when you hear them in a place that, if someone says, thank you for doing this, this is really, really great, and this is the story that happened with my son, then you can use that as some of your outcome measures. There's lots of different ways to do it. You can put in a suggestion box, or to gather information on, are we meeting the needs? Is there anything that you would like to say to our staff? And sometimes people will give you good feedback there you can use. And after you get done with today's workshop, you'll get a survey and it'll ask you a few questions. And that kind of information can be used to help inform what you're going to do next. If there are already measurable items in place, such as a grade or weight, those are easy to measure. When you're talking about a change in behavior or a change in attitude, that's where you have to be a little more creative and think about what truly shows that difference. And that's what you're looking for and what you're trying to measure. So, all right, anybody come up with something they wanted, some ideas on how to measure?
So how do you do that then, if it's just a one-on-one conversation, or you have a body of maybe 15 youngsters and maybe they were unruly at the first time or second time or third time or whatever, but slowly but surely you see a change in attitude, and understanding. So how do you measure that?
Okay, well, observation is one way. You can talk about the observation, but it's a stronger case if for each kid coming in, they set 2 or 3 goals for themselves, right? And as they go through your program and they gain more confidence and they gain more ability to be part of the group or be learning, then you check on their progress toward the goals that they're trying to do. Whether that is, a goal can be, I'm going to complete my homework every day this week. What percentage of the students that you served actually reached 1 or 2 of their 3 goals? Then you showed an impact, right? You've shown that by being here, they've set a goal, we've worked toward it, and they've met that goal. So when you take, that happens a lot in case management. We meet with people and we say, okay, so where are your challenges in life right now? What are the things that really cause, make things hard? And you identify 4 or 5 things that are, need to change in my life. And then you put together some action steps of what that's going to be. You're going to come together with people in a group, or we're going to work on one-on-one and talk about anger management, or we're going to talk about how you, you don't feel comfortable speaking up in class, and that's something you really want to change, is being able to ask a question in class. Whatever the case may be. Then that individualized plan gets carried out. And at the end of the program, you look at, what's called an aggregate level. You look at all 15 participants. Were they able to meet their goals? Not all of them are going to have a goal of improving their grades, right? But maybe 4 of them do. Maybe 6 of them have a goal of just behavior changes and getting less detentions or getting less, I'm not going to say timeouts, but losing less points in the behavioral system. And by the end of the program, of those 15, 14 have reached 2 of their goals. And then you can show you've made an impact. Does that make sense?
I
don't know
guess.
if okay. So give me an example of what are some of the things, the behaviors that you're trying to modify with the students, or what program you're trying to, what the outcome is.
Well, I'm just looking at being courteous and patient, and children are children, but they have to understand there are times that you speak and you don't speak, times you run when you're not supposed to run, and they have to have their own self-respect. And if it's not being taught at home, maybe not in school as much, but when they are someplace else, they know how to control themselves. And I understand, from age 1 to 7 or 8, they're gonna do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But
what age group do you have that you're working with?
oh goodness.
Well, I guess we're mostly pre-K to about 3rd grade.
Okay. So what you could do then is have some sort of like a smiley face range, right? That has behaviors tied to it. So, you give people, these are the 4 rules while you're here. We want everybody to be respectful. We want everybody to be kind to each other. We want to take turns. We want to have fun, right? And if everybody follows the rules that day, they get a smiley face. If they've missed 1 or 2 of those rules, maybe they just get a straight face. And if they've had a bad day, they get a frowny face. And so then by the end of the week or the end of the month, you count up how many people got smiley faces and frowny faces and see if you can make a change. You can show how much of that is moved over the time period that this particular group of students or that particular student has increased the percentage of days that they have a smiley face versus a frowny face. Okay. And that's something at that age range they can understand. They know what the faces mean. And it's something that, you can give them stickers. to say, yep, you had a good day today, or no, you didn't have a good day today. Let's try tomorrow and see if we can get that smiley face, right? And you know, just making an understanding that it's just about today. We're going to focus on today, and then tomorrow we focus on today, and then we're going to learn these behaviors, and then as we go through, you can show how they've changed. So if those 15 kids at the beginning, only 3 got a smiley face, and then by 6 months later, you know, 10 of them are regularly getting smiley faces, you can show your improvement.
Okay.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense? That's just an example. There's
Well-
you can find other things online too of working with that age group that schools use and pre-K programs use. 4-H clubs might use them. So sometimes you can find something that's already out there that you don't have to create a whole new system.
Do you have one off the top of your head?
I do not. That was the one I just told you. I just kind of pulled that out of some experiences I've had. But yeah, you just kind of have to look through what's out there
Okay.
and figure out which one works best. But just do a little searching. Or if you have a volunteer that likes to get online, have them look for something for you. That's something that a volunteer could do to help identify your assessment options or evaluation tools for that age range, right? And it could be something if smiley faces are too hard, maybe it's, you know, a certain color of you know, you use construction paper and cut out a shape that's relevant to your program, and the different colors mean different things. And, you know, there's just lots of ways to do it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have a hard to measure outcome? We can brainstorm. Keeping an eye on the time too. Okay. Like I said, there's lots of resources online. Most of what we do, someone else has tried before, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can build off of what's been successful elsewhere. And we borrow a lot in grant writing, right? We borrow and build upon. We grow from there and move forward. So, all right. And our last mistake is not making plans for the next step, right? We're too busy in survival mode. We're just working day to day. We got to do what we got to do. We tell ourselves the future will take care of itself. You know, we tell ourselves that grant was easy to get. I'm sure we'll get more money. Or what I often hear is, you know, I wrote 2 grants. I got both of those. It's no big deal. I'll be able to get lots. Well, every grant's different. So you still have to do your planning and you still have to do your prep. But yeah, we want to make sure we can grow and develop and enhance. So our risks in not planning is if we're just operating day to day, that'll just keep you in the cycle of operating day to day, right? We're just going to be where we're at if we're just focused on what we're going to do to get through this month, right? Another risk is when that grant ends, there's no other funding coming, right? And when that grant stops, the momentum that was created with this grant also stops. The program can stop. People can get laid off. Clients and communities have reduced resources that now they've been dependent on because they're good and they're out there. So your best practices are to, you know, try and diversify your funding if possible. Don't put all your eggs in one grant basket or all in one donor to carry things out. You know, you want to look at ways to find different sources. You want to maybe have some foundation money, maybe look at some city or state money, maybe look at some federal money once your program's grown enough to do so. And maybe you want to see if there's a way that you can get some community buy-in and donations. That helps you plan to the future. I also recommend to apply to more than one funding source for the same project and stack those grants on top of each other. You don't duplicate what you're doing, but you have different timelines when that grant will end. So like if the grant we've got now, I've got $25,000. I think that'll get me through 6 months. I need another grant that's going to start before that 6 months ends. So I have enough money to get the next 6 month or year. And then I got to apply for another grant so that I can continue it for the later. And then you go back and renew them if that's allowable. Some grants allow you to come back and ask for more money. Some don't. Some say we invested once and we're not going to invest again. So you want to have multiple funding sources with different ending times if possible so that you can keep things rolling. over. Now, that's not always possible. If you are mostly funded with federal grants, most of those are going to run from October to September cycles. If you're on state grants, most of those run July to June. And so they're all going to end about the same time. So you get really busy when you're writing those. But if you have more than one, if one falls through, you've got other money to help you out, right? You cannot ask for two funding sources to pay for the exact same dollar expense, but you can have two funding sources pay for $2 that go into the same project. So for instance, if I'm building a building, I cannot ask for two agencies to pay for the front door. Okay, but I can have one funder pay for the front door and one pay for the windows. It's still building a building, but it's not paying for the exact same expense. If you are splitting expenses, like you have a personnel that works on two different projects and they're going to spend 60% of their time on this project, so they get funding from that, and 40% on that one, that's okay. You just can't pay them, you can't collect 200% of what they get paid and only pay them 100%. Or, you know, if they make $10,000, you can't collect 20 and only pay them 10, right? So, but it's okay to have different funding sources working toward the same goal. And as you are going through a grant project, you're going to use the data that you collect, you're going to use the lessons that you learn to develop the next steps and plan to how you're going to expand and grow. So if your program's going well, things are doing great, and you want to keep going with what you're doing, that's great. But also look at, what can I do next? How can we bring in maybe the next age group? You know, they've gone through our program and now they're 7 and they're not quite there yet. So we want to keep working with them till they're 10. So let's develop a program to 7 to 10-year-olds. So how do we add that based on the information that we have already? And what funding source are we going to go to add that, instead of going back to the same people and saying, just give us more money to do the same thing with more kids? You want to have different funders that are going to help you grow it. That's one way to help you expand your research and get more people hired and get more stuff that you need. Right? It's on, you know, focus on those solutions and the outcomes, then you can do that. And you should be applying for new funding while this grant is still active. Don't wait till the grant ends to then go and ask for more money, because you're going to have a gap in your budget, and that's when things stop and halt and cause problems. There's lots of resources out there on where to find grant money. That's some of the things we cover in training that we'll be doing in the fall. Where to find money, what to put in those grants and those kind of things. I know that Volunteer West Virginia offers other information from time to time. I think a lot of people have access to Grant Station, which is through the West Virginia Nonprofit Association. Or if you're a member of TechSoup, you get Grant Station for free as part of that service, I believe. Maybe not TechSoup. Maybe it's Grant Professionals. That's what I was looking at. Anyway, there's lots of places out there where you can get information on how to find more funding. But it's best practices to always have things going. And I tell people in nonprofits that you have to make grant writing another program. It's one of the programs that you do. It should have equal amount of importance as your after school program, as your food program, as your education programs, because it is necessary to keep those going. So give it the time and attention that it needs to do that. Doesn't mean you have to hire somebody, doesn't mean you have to have a full-fledged office of grants, but just make sure you have the time dedicated to planning ahead so that it keeps your program running and you don't end up with gaps in funding. All right, so my takeaways from today: to improve your future grant successes, incorporate the following practices. We want to, 1, acknowledge all awards, no matter how small. We just want to acknowledge that we received it and start that communication with the funder's program officer. And the program officer is the person whose job it is to answer the phone and answer questions. And and they know that particular aspect of the grants that they give out, so they can answer the questions best. That's who the program officer is when I refer to that. Read all the terms and conditions. Make sure you know what's expected and you don't miss any important deadlines. You want to track all your expenses by grant and by the category or line item. maintain communication with that funding agency. They're your partner. They want to work with you. Now, don't call them every day with every little thing that happens, but keep regular contact and say, hey, this was exciting. I just wanted to let you know we had a really big success. And we're looking forward to, we couldn't wait till reporting time to tell you because it was so exciting. Or we've just hit this hiccup and we need some guidance. That's when you call them. Make sure you spend the money. Don't hold on to it. You don't get bonus points by stashing it away somewhere. And most grants you can't continue to earn interest on. Federal grants, there's limits on how long it can sit in a bank account, those kind of things. So be careful with that. Submit required reports that they're complete and they're on time. Track and report your outcomes and impacts, and plan for the next grant at the beginning of the last one. So as soon as you get one grant, start thinking about the next. All right. So we've talked a lot about negativity and what not to do, but these are the pieces that you can do to help increase your funding as you move forward. So, all right. And I'll leave with that. Are there any questions, comments, thoughts? And my contact information is there if anybody wants to track that down or write that down. If you have questions later, feel free to reach out. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions at this point. Oops, I lost my screen.
And so you'll be emailing out these slides to us?
Yes, I'll send a Adobe pack. You'll get the full recording, but then I'll send a PDF version to Dana to send out.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Good.
much. Very,
Thank you.
very easy to understand, which some of us need. So.
Well, good. I'm glad. And I wish you all the best with all of your programs and activities. I think I see a hand raising there. Somebody.
Richard Thornton, Title
Yes.
40 coordinator at Public Defender Services. I asked Dana Bryant if it was all right to use this platform to broadcast a grant funding opportunity.
Oh, yes.
Here at Public Defender Services, this has been helpful. We actually apply for grants to run some of our programs in the name of holistic defense. And we also now are operating as a pass-through for, to identify subrecipients for Title 40 funding, specifically around child abuse and neglect in West Virginia. And I don't have to explain the level of crisis that that represents for us in the state. But I would like to use this opportunity to just put out there where people can find that grant funding opportunity on the VSS, on Oasis. And I'm just trying to, anytime I participate in anything, any kind of webinar around grants and things, I'm just trying to broadcast this opportunity as much as possible. We have had 2 nonprofits apply. One's already been awarded. So I'm going to go ahead and just put it here in the chat. And I would, if you want to broadcast this around to anyone in your network, don't be, don't let the section of legal representation spook anyone, because yeah, of course it is about legal representation, but the second part of that, proceedings and by improving the processes involved in resolving, that has broadened. Title 40 has been opened up in the past couple of years. So it also involves services that support legal representation. So that opens it up to social services and social workers and all sorts of programs. So there's a link to the grant funding opportunity if you just want to help us broadcast that out. I'm trying to get the word out. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. That was an awesome plug. And thanks for sharing that every chance you get. So important. And if you're interested, Richard's going to put that in the chat, and then I'm sure he'll share his contact information. So yeah.
It's in the chat. If you go to the link, it takes you to WV Oasis, VSS. Click on View Grant Opportunities, and then there's a search box, and put in ICAN, ICAN. That stands for Impacting Child Abuse and Neglect. And then you'll see Public Defender Services and a link to all the necessary things that anyone may want to apply for, application forms, etc. So it may not apply to any or all of you, but it may to people that you know in your network, especially now that Title 4E funding for child abuse and neglect has been opened up to all sorts of resources, services to help in legal representation. So just trying to get the word out. I don't think the state of West Virginia is aware that this funding source is available. Thank you.
You're welcome. Of course, Richard. And you have some question in the chat. Kelly was interested, so you'll check that out. If anyone else
Parent Navigator, the CIP program, it's also Title 4E funded, but this is different. This is a whole new grant funding opportunity that similar, but kind of in the same part of that holistic defense.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard, and thanks for
Sure.
the opportunity. We're all in this together. Someone sent me a message earlier and said that, and I really think so. And Nikki, I love your presentation. It's the first time we put that one together. I thought it was a gem. So much expert information, really a cool sneak peek into the funder's perspective and lessons to learn, because our challenges make us even better. So I loved it. I thought it was a fabulous presentation. We're really grateful. We love working with Nikki. We'd be curious to hear what you all think. So I'm going to put the feedback survey in the chat underneath Richard's message. If you have a chance, go ahead and fill that out. It's really short. It'll only take a few minutes. You can comment on today's presentation and give us suggestions for next year's roster training. So I really loved it. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Nikki, do you have any final parting words for the group today?
No, but thank you for those kind words. I saw one comment in the chat about, can this be offered for other people? If it's something you want to reach out to me, I do training on the side as well. So my contact information is in the slides that you'll receive. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikki. And if you all are looking for the slides, I'm going to send them out as soon as we're done. I'll just convert them into a PDF, Nikki, if that's okay. And we'll send out the recording. It'll be a private YouTube link. And I think that's that. So nice to see so many new friends and old friends. And thank you, Nikki. I loved it. I think we knocked it out of the park. And we're taking a break in June, and I'll see you all in July to talk about rural volunteerism. You're not going to want to miss it. So we'll see you all again soon, and enjoy the rest of your day today.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.